Thinking about building an ADU in Boise? Watch this first. A lot of homeowners in Boise are sitting on an opportunity right now and don't even realize it. I'm talking about the ability to add a second or even third living space on your property. But I'm also seeing people go down the wrong path, spend money on plans, and then find out they can't actually build what they thought they could. So before you go too far down that road, let's make sure you understand what's actually possible. Hi, I'm Sylvia with Wealth Builders Realty here in the Boise area, where I've been investing in real estate for over 20 years. As an active investor and realtor in the area, I have seen firsthand the changes in affordability in our market that are driving these ADU housing conversations. Over the last 5 to 6 years, affordability has dropped significantly, while at the same time, Idaho continues to be a state people are moving to. So we have more demand, higher prices, and fewer affordable housing options. And because of that, cities like Boise are being pushed to rethink how housing works, especially within existing neighborhoods. That's really what's driving these zoning changes. Now, from an investor standpoint, this matters even more, because when you're looking at long-term returns, income potential, and flexibility with your property, ADUs can be a really powerful tool. But they're also one of those things where the details matter. And this is not something you want to guess your way through. You want to understand it before you spend money or make decisions. So let's start with a little context. Back in 2023, Boise made a pretty big shift with what they called their modern zoning code. And really, all that means is the city rewrote a lot of their zoning rules to allow more flexibility, especially when it comes to housing. Before that, ADUs were pretty limited. More restrictions, more hoops, and honestly, not very investor friendly. But that 2023 update really started to open the door. For example, one of the biggest changes was removing the owner occupancy requirement. So before, you had to live in the home to have an ADU on the property. Now, you could have a rental property and still an ADU for additional income. That's a huge shift, especially for investors. They also simplified a lot of the rules around what you could build and where. So that was really the turning point where ADUs started becoming more mainstream here in the Treasure Valley. Now, fast forward to today. Boise is taking it even further. One of the biggest changes is that you can now have up to 2 ADUs on a single property, depending on your lot and how everything is laid out. They've also made it much easier to create what's called a junior ADU, which is basically adding a second living space inside your existing home with its own kitchen and entrance without triggering full duplex requirements like it used to. And this is actually a big deal. Before, if you added a second kitchen to your home, the city could classify your property as a duplex. And once that happened, you were dealing with a completely different set of rules. More restrictions, sometimes different approvals, and in some cases, it wasn't even allowed depending on your zoning. And that doesn't even cover the negative ramifications to your property taxes and insurance costs. Now, Boise is making it easier to create what they call a junior ADU. So you can add that second living space without crossing into that duplex category. And this is where I want to pause for a second, because this comes up all the time here. A lot of our homes in our areas have those upstairs bonus rooms. Maybe they already have a closet and a full bathroom. So the question becomes, can you just add a staircase, put in a kitchen, and turn that into an ADU? And the answer is yes, but not the way most people think. Because the second you add a kitchen, the city now considers that a separate dwelling unit. So it's not just a remodel anymore. You have to meet all of the ADU requirements, go through permitting, and make sure it doesn't get classified as a duplex. There's also still no minimum parking requirement, which is a big deal for a lot of properties. But there are a few new things you need to be aware of. For example, now there's a requirement to have a sidewalk connecting the ADU to the street. That might sound small, but depending on your lot, that can have a significant impact on your layout and your cost. Now, another question I get is this: how big can these actually be? In Boise, each ADU is generally capped at 900 square feet or 70% of your main home, whichever is smaller. And that applies whether it's attached, detached, or even a garage conversion. So if you're thinking about doing 2 units, just know that size limit applies to each one individually, but your lot still has to support it with setbacks, placement, utilities, and overall layout. Now, on top of what the city is doing, the state of Idaho also has been working on ADU laws. In 2023, they passed a law, but this is where it gets a little misunderstood. That law mainly focused on what are called internal ADUs. So things like the basement apartment or converting part of your home, i.e. that bonus room we talked about earlier, or converting a garage. And what it did was prevent HOAs from creating new rules that completely banned those types of ADUs. But, and this is the important part, it did not override any rules that were already in place before that. So if your HOA already had restrictions when you bought your home, those can still apply to you today. And now there's another bill in 2026 that could expand those protections even further. But depending on when you're watching this, that may or may not be in full effect yet. So this is one of those areas where you want to double check current status before making any decisions. Now, with all these changes, you might be thinking, okay, this sounds great. Why wouldn't everyone just build an ADU? And here's the real world perspective. Boise is definitely making it easier than ever to create rental income, house hack, or even build space for family. But just because it's easier to build one doesn't automatically mean it's the right move for you. You still need to look at your lot, your utilities, your HOA, and most importantly, your numbers. I've seen ADUs work really well for some people and not pencil at all for others. So if this is something you've been thinking about, even just a little bit, my advice is this. Before you spend money on design, plans, or anything like that, make sure you actually understand what's possible on your specific property. That's where having the right guidance up front can make all the difference. And if you want help walking through that, I'm always happy to have that conversation. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you on the next one.